I do what I do.
Okay? Nevertheless, when the illusion is shattered, when they're forced to confront the reality that we are just as capable, just as brilliant, and sometimes far more accomplished, it doesn't always lead to humility. It doesn't make them want to work harder. It leads to resentment. It leads to rage, because now the lie is being exposed, that the myth of white superiority is bleeding out in the aisle of the first class cabin. And for some, rather than reckon with the truth, they lash out socially, politically, and violently, because the world doesn't look like what they were promised or what they were brainwashed to believe it should look like, because we're never supposed to rise that high. Look, I'm a black trial lawyer. Speaking of which, if you've been in a car wreck, feel free to give me a call at 713-229-0770. That's 713-229-0770. You've been in a check, been in a wreck, I help you get a check. Been in a crash, help you get some cash. All right. Let me stop. I'm just saying, y'all, just so you know, okay? But I am a black trial lawyer. Been at it for 25 years. Be 25 years in October. But in this regard, I want to kind of bring this closer to home with something I've experienced firsthand in my professional life as a lawyer. One of the worst things that can happen to a white attorney at a predominantly white firm is to lose a case against a black lawyer. But not just any black lawyer, a black attorney who owns his own firm, a black attorney who didn't go to one of these Ivy League pipeline schools, a black attorney who graduated from a historically black university, specifically the Southern University, Lawson and Baton Rouge, a black attorney like me. Because see, in their mind, that's a double, triple insult. You see, they've been conditioned to believe that someone like me, who didn't go to their institutions, who doesn't play by their rules, who isn't under the authority of some white owner or partner or firm, must be inherently inferior. And in their worldview, black excellence only exists when it's validated by white institutions or white people. And so imagine what happens when they lose to me in court. It's not just a legal loss, it's a personal crisis. It threatens the very foundation of what they've been taught to believe about themselves, their education, and their superiority. And in many cases, it puts their status in that white firm at risk. Because if you lose against that black guy, you know, that guy, the one from the HBCU, the one from the quote unquote inferior law school, then you must be trash, John. People are going to start whispering. So here's what I've learned. I use that. I push the envelope. I structure my cases so that by the time we're in the thick of litigation, they're looking at overwhelming odds. And more often than not, rather than take a risk of losing to the black guy, they fold. They settle for top dollar every time just to get me off their docket, because their racism doesn't just blind them, it traps them. It makes them so afraid of being exposed, so terrified of what a loss would mean, that they'll walk away from a fight they might have otherwise dragged out. That's the irony. The very system that tells them they're superior becomes their own downfall, because when the illusion shatters and they're forced to confront the reality that a black lawyer not only matched them, but beat them, they'd rather disappear than deal with the fallout. So yes, white supremacy is dangerous, but it's also deeply fragile. And sometimes that fragility can be weaponized against them. Shout out to Red Sigma and my man, Lance Jackson. Now let's be clear. I want you to understand some shout out to all the white women. White women, I might have a few white women up in there. I don't know what happened. I've got a lot more ladies in the chat room. I don't know why. Shout out to all you white women. See, before white supremacy was globalized through colonialism and slavery, it was first tested on white women. White patriarchal supremacy, the ideological and legal system that elevated white men above all others, it first asserted its control, not on foreign lands, but on the bodies and lives of white women. In modern Europe and early America, white women were legally and socially treated as property. What does that sound like? Shout out to FSK. Thank you for the super stick. White women and white children at that, but white women were the first property of white men under their legal system. Under the doctrine of coverture, which was rooted in Anglo-American common law, a married woman had no separate legal identity from her husband. She couldn't sign contracts, she couldn't own property, she couldn't initiate a lawsuit or even retain custody of her own money. There was a famous writer, his name was William Blackstone. He explained in 1765, by marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. The very being of her legal existence of the woman is suspended during marriage. In other words, she don't even exist no more as an individual. What does that sound like? Until the mid-19th century, that's about 1850, most Western legal systems, Germany, France, Britain, Ireland, America, in the United States, it wasn't until the Married Woman's Property Act passed. And that was incrementally between 1839 and the early 1900s that women gained some rights. Even then, they were routinely denied autonomy in marriage and business and finance. They were ignored. White women didn't get their right to vote until after black men got their right to vote. It took a whole amendment, the 19th Amendment, in 1920 to grant white women the right to vote in federal elections. It wasn't until the Equal Credit Opportunity of 1974. 1974, that was 51 years ago. That me, I was born then. Until that time, banks required a man, a co-signer, to come sign, even for financially independent women. That shift in 1974, that marked a pivotal moment in women's financial liberation. That was less than 50 years ago, family. Marriage didn't offer any protection. Divorce laws in the U.S. favored men all the way up until the 1970s. They had something called, particularly under fault-based divorce, which required proof of wrongdoing like adultery or something like that, or cruelty. And that's something that the judge would have to find. And judges universally ruled in favor of the men. And the kids would go to the children, the family home would go to him, and all the assets. You had so many situations where the dad would tell the children that your mama ran out on us. And the truth was he divorced her and put her out. You see? But the legal system reinforced the patriarchal notions that men, white men in particular, were the head of the household. Women who divorced, they were left with nothing. She was homeless, stigmatized. That's why women, white women especially, they always have, if you talk to some of those old white women, they got married 2, 3, 4, 5 times because they had no rights without a husband. You see, and a lot of white women, they're aware of the risks, and they develop very subversive strategies to deal with that white man. In the antebellum South, if you look in the historical records, you will see that white women oftentimes would hire out their black servants to people and secretly keep the money and the income. That's why dad would give his daughter the slaves, not to the husband, but she would then hire them out in places like South Carolina as a seamstress or a blacksmith, and she would then keep the money. She created a hidden nest egg so that she could eventually escape her husband. And that tells you how deeply embedded this white male dominance was. Even women of the dominant race had to undermine their own legal system just to breathe financially. And this legacy of control hasn't disappeared. It simply evolved. And as white women have begun to earn college degrees, and enter into the workforce, opening businesses and higher rates than white men, many of these white men, they feel betrayed. They don't see progress. According to the data from the National Center for Education Statistics of 2020, white women have earned 62% of all bachelor's degrees. You understand? Awarded to white students. That means only 38% of white men are getting bachelor's degrees. The U.S. Census reports that white female-owned businesses grew by 21% from 2014 to 2019. That's outpacing the growth rate of businesses owned by white men. Meanwhile, white birth rates have declined sharply. I learned this 30 years ago in my environmental science classes. When you give women education, they have children later on in life. The more education you give women, the more occupied they are with a business, the less number of children they have. And it bears out. When you look at the CDC statistics in 2022, white women now have a fertility rate of 1.56, which means more white people are dying than are being born. The replacement level is 2.1%. That's like 2 kids and 1/10 of a kid. Higher education level, increased workforce participation. That directly correlates with delayed childbirth and smaller family sizes. Same things happen to black women. The same thing will happen to Latino women. That's what happened. You give women something to do. They ain't trying to push no baby out. Why would you want to push a cantaloupe from between your soft spot when you can get out there and get you a job and work, huh? Right? That's what's bearing out. Nevertheless, this perceived erosion of dominance has led to a lot of aggressive political and cultural backlash. Look at the Supreme Court ruling in Dobbs v. Jackson. Look at Roe versus Wade being overturned. You got 21 states who enacted full or partial baby deletion bans. And some of these folk, they don't care if the woman was raped or whatever. You're going to push that white baby out. You see? And what that does is it reveals a deeper agenda to reassert patriarchal control over reproduction, starting with white women. So let's not make a mistake. Women as historical equals to white men in the system. I want you to understand that. Dennis Spurling got the mic on fire. Black father, I have black son. Tune in, weekly feeling inspired. From the heart, real talk ignite. Every episode brings the light. Subscribe, hit the like, won't you dare. Share the love, you know it's family. Join us every week, don't be late. Drop some coins in the collection plate. Drop some coins, enjoy the ride. Come say hi, catch the wave, don't pass by. Lifted spirits always inside. In this podcast, joy takes flight. Subscribe, hit the like, won't you dare. Share the love, you know it's fair. Join us every week, don't be late. Drop some coins in the collection plate. Drop some coins. Donation. I thought it was a class. Hey man, I'll do what I do. You know that. Your ass, class. Come on, now what? You tall black mother. Women up inside. I don't give a fuck about